we've figured out a way to make rocket fuel cheaper and better. What we cracked was the ability not to engineer biology or modern biology to be better. It's to go back in time to before biology existed and play evolution again, but this time with a dollar sign on the forehead. Biology is everything, right? It's what we wear, it's what we eat, it's the fuel for our cars, it's our environment. The ability to think about it in synthetic terms is intriguing.
You could have started OR without me, and I couldn't start OR without you. There's like no chance that I could understand synthetic biology.
I'm sure you couldn't. I think I do what I do because I care. When I think about investing my time and my brain into how to use biology, how to solve problems so that my kids will have a better world to live in. If somebody pitched you an idea that was very science, like the early stages of SpaceX.
You mean like OR?
Like OR.
But I did it.
Why?
Don't make me regret it, okay?
No, do you still trust this?
I do.
Why?
Welcome back to another episode of Invested. I am thrilled to be here with Dan Davidi, Dr. Dan Davidi.
My mom would be proud.
Your mom would be proud. But you're not a medical doctor. What kind of doctor are you?
I take care of bacteria. I'm a biologist by training. I'm a mathematician as well. So I have a PhD in biotechnology.
From the Weizmann Institute.
Yep.
Dan Davidi, by background, why don't you give everybody your entire background?
That's going to be short. So as you said, I'm a PhD by training. I graduated from Tel Aviv University, mathematics and biology. Then I moved to the Weizmann Institute, where I majored in synthetic biology. This is, in general, something we're probably going to be talking about, so I'm going to leave that open. 2019, I moved to Harvard as a postdoctoral researcher in the medical school over there, and then went on and became a faculty member to start a synthetic biology center inside Harvard Medical School. And from there, moved to Amazon Grand Challenge. This is the Google X version of Amazon, where they do crazy projects. And then was blessed to join you here at Aleph as an entrepreneur in residence. Spent about a year. And now founder and CEO of OR.
Do you want to tell the story of how you ended up as an entrepreneur in residence at Aleph, or should I?
I could try.
All right, go ahead.
So one day I get a phone call. I'm sitting on the beach in Del Mar, California, enjoying the weather, working in my corporate job. Think I have the best job in the world. And then Susan, your assistant, on the other line. And she says, Michael Eisenberg wants to talk to you. Who's Michael Eisenberg? He's the most important investor in the world.
Yeah.
It's like
no way she said that.
She said he has a wiki page. I was like, if someone has a wiki page, I should listen. So I listen. I hear her carefully. She says he's gonna call you, and then I talk to you. I think you asked me one question: what would be my job description if I wrote it myself? It's like, that's an interesting challenge. We spent about 30 minutes talking on the phone. I sent you a 2-pager the next day, and then I get another phone call coming, inviting me to come to a kosher restaurant in New York the next weekend. I was like, okay, I'm gonna jump on a plane and come meet you. I think it was a Wednesday or a Thursday or something.
Wednesday.
That was 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago. 3 hours later, we said nothing about science or synthetic biology, but we decided we wanted to work together.
It was only 3 hours? I thought it was longer than that.
It felt longer.
Yeah, included a walk home in the cold.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Walk back to the hotel, at least in the cold, yeah.
Yeah, no, it was really, time flew by, and it was a conversation about everything. I think for the first time for me, really talking to an investor, but I realized investors are also people, and you were a special one. And that was fun. That was very engaging. And I think the fun fact was that 2 weeks later, came see you in Israel, and you were partners at Aleph, and never came back. So that was really the...
And then your wife and 2 kids and the dog joined.
So actually, they joined me on the first visit. We left the dog in San Diego, and I only flew back about 3 weeks later to bring the dog, which was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Harder than your PhD?
Yes, I mean, bringing a dog from America to Israel is hard. Yeah, that was during COVID, and dogs were not allowed on planes, and that was, yeah.
What was the dog adjustments issues?
First of all, he has issues. Let me tell you, he moved with us from Maine. So he was born in Maine and then moved to San Diego. So that was quite a change. And then moving to Israel was quite of a shock for him. He loves it because we live in a village and we have chickens. So he's like walking the neighborhood all day long. But otherwise, he really is attached. He's a golden doodle. I think it's a 70-pound golden doodle. I mean, your listeners are American, right? So I'm going to use pounds. He's a big guy, and he just loves it. Yeah.
Who adjusted better, your kids or the dog?
I think the kids have moved 4 schools in 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And they're, yeah,
Important question for you before I get into synthetic biology. Harvard or Weizmann?
100% Weizmann. No doubt.
Why?
Harvard is just like a fancy name. I don't want to insult anyone, but I remember getting to Harvard the first time, and I stood near the sign, Harvard Medical School, and I was like so proud stepping into the building. I come inside and I see one of the old labs in Tel Aviv University, like reminded me exactly the same place with the same smell. I think what's unique about Harvard is not the inside, and working at Harvard is actually not such a fun experience. What's unique about Harvard is the concentration of talent, not the average talent level. I think at Weizmann, the average talent level is much, much higher than Harvard, but the density is much higher at Boston in general and specifically at Harvard.
Because there's just a lot more people. There's a lot more
It's
disciplines.
it's the mecca of research, right? So everybody goes there. The density of hospitals per capita per square meter is just like insanely high. You have all the money in the world to do research, and that's very powerful.
It's interesting you say that you have all the money in the world to do research. Weizmann has less money, I would guess, although it's not a poor institution. Um, I've been thinking about that a lot, given the DeepSeek moment. Now, I don't buy the DeepSeek was trained on $6 million. There's billions of dollars of chips behind that. So, but I think it was more constrained than, Meta or OpenAI in terms of compute. And Weizmann is a world-class scientific institution. Do you ever think about this issue in academia of places with more resources versus less resources to whether more innovative science comes out of one place or the other?
I think actually to your point that innovation is not dependent on capital. It's the ability to really, and in the world we live in, it's data that we need to generate, and that costs money. And specifically in biology, where I come from, generating data is expensive. I think it's an unfair advantage that a place with a lot of capital has. I think the Israeli ingenuity, in a way, has overcome this, and I think Weizmann, again, is one of the top-ranked institutions across the world in terms of IP per capita, in terms of publications per capita. So it doesn't show as necessarily a limitation in innovation, but it shows as a limitation in the ability to first take stuff to the next level. So after you've discovered something, how do you actually call it monetize it, or how do you capitalize on it? And the second thing would be really the ability to attract more resource into it and more people, and that requires money.
If you had to explain what's the magic of the Weizmann Institute, what's the magic?
I think it's a connectivity. First of all,
What
it
does that
looks
mean?
so. I've worked during my PhD. I had a supervisor, my professor, Juan Milo, but I published 17 papers with 6 different professors. Right, so that's unique. That's unusual. And I had sometimes 15 authors on the same paper. So the ability to really network and connect is built into the systems. Some departments are more than others. So I'm not saying this is necessarily generic to the Weizmann Institute, but in the systems biology department, when I was part of it, that was something very special that I remember. Um, Another thing is that it's a closed environment, unlike many of the schools in the U.S. Right? So you have a fence actually, and there's a guard, which is like the Israeli school. It's a very different experience because everything is like it's almost like a bubble, and the Weizmann Institute looks like a nature reserve. It's one of the nicest places to visit. I heard once that they actually spend about 20% of the revenues on gardening, which is insane, but it does the job, I guess. It's a beautiful place.
Listen, you need beauty to encourage creativity, I guess.
All the other way around.
To calm the neurotic scientist down, it has that work. So I want to talk for a second about synthetic biology. So my fascination with synthetic biology, which by the way, to this moment, I don't really understand anything about, but started with a conversation with Professor Joe Jacobson of MIT, uh, who about 5.5, 6 years ago, who now was also the other grandfather of some of my grandchildren, because his daughter is married to my son. He came and said, I think it was 5.5, 6 years ago, Israel needs something like the Broad Institute. Synthetic biology is coming. Israel needs to get to the forefront of this, and all you need to do is wind me up and say something like that. And I get going, and I started to meet people and get involved in this and think about it and lose some money in it. And finally, I came to the conclusion that I need to find someone who really knew what he was talking about in synthetic biology. And hence we looked for an EIR who could do it. And our former intern, Ron Miasnik, who I think ultimately put us in touch even before Susan
Correct.
called you,
Correct.
before that love at first sight dinner or the call you got from Susan, was instrumental in doing this. And Juan spent time researching. So before we get into, George, can you just tell everyone what synthetic biology is? Because 6 years later, I'm not sure I understand what it is.
Yeah, so I've spent 18 years maybe on this, and I'm not sure I understand either. I think you're part of a group of people who have found, and me included, right, synthetic biology to be an interesting term because biology is everything, right? It's what we wear, it's what we eat, it's the fuel for our cars, it's our environment, it's the nature, it's our pet, it's like everything, it's our health, our mental health, everything is biology. And the ability to think about it in synthetic terms is intriguing. It's like, what can we do with biology that is synthetic, that is new? How can we think about biology as an engineering discipline? I think this is where synthetic biology has emerged. It actually started back in the 2000s, right? When biofuel was a thing. And people have engineered other organisms to create oil for gas to replace crude oil. Synthetic biology has was hit hard over the years and has made people lose a lot of money, like trillions of dollars because of over promises. And I think that's part of the magic, but also the danger in synthetic biology of if we can engineer biology, we can engineer everything. If we can shift from thinking about biology as zoologists, we look at nature, we try to understand it, we try mathematical models to understand it. Now we can implement tools like CRISPR, we can implement tools like robotics, we can use AI, of course, to engineer biology to do new things. That's amazing. But we also have to remember that biology is a living organism and it has its own way of making decisions, its own way of evolving. And that's been a challenge for the synthetic biology community over the years. And this is why it's unclear exactly what synthetic biology is. What can we do with it? How do we leverage that for the benefit of society? Are there also unintended consequences and the dangers of synthetic biology? I think that was a very long answer of something you didn't ask, but that's kind of like my take of the mystery around what synthetic biology really is and why I also find it hard to understand sometimes.
If you had to explain it to a 15-year-old in one sentence, what would that one sentence be? Synthetic biology is
The ability to engineer biology to do new functions.
like COVID.
So COVID is example, but we can also engineer bacteria to eat plastic, or we can engineer drugs to respond to stimuli to treat cancer at specific locations in the body.
Do you ever wonder if this is like playing God?
No, I don't. I think the reason is because it depends on the perspective. I mean, if you want to say God created the tools that we are playing with, I think you can apply that to almost everything, right? Not just biology, but we do have the ability to play with the genetic code, which again is very intriguing. But if you think about it, we also have the ability to take two elements, mix them together, and create concrete. That's another playing God exercise, if you will, right? So this is just like the sandbox we have and the tools that we have.
Now that I've asked the God question, so now tell me, what are your personal core values?
That's a tough one because I unlike synthetic biology, maybe I don't have a one-liner. I think I do what I do because I care. When I think about investing my time and my brain and my thinking into how to use biology, how to solve problems, so that my kids will have a better world to live in. I'm actually very concerned about what's waiting for them in many levels: political, environmental, health related, society related. I think I'm just taking my part in this.
So you're engineering like cell level biology because political biology is, or the biology of politicians is too hard to engineer?
It's a waste of time.
Okay, so you came back here. I should probably ask you before I come to the next question, like, what were your impressions of me? Like, who's this guy who kind of landed on me out of nowhere on the beach in Del Mar and then took me to dinner at a kosher restaurant and said, hey, why don't you come back to Israel? You went home and you told your wife, I met a lunatic? What did you do?
To be honest, I told my wife I met our landing pad. I met the person who can take us back to Israel. as an Israeli living in the U.S., you constantly, or abroad, right? As an immigrant, you constantly, as far as I've experienced it, you constantly look for excuses to come back to Israel. But it's just like sometimes too hard because schools are better, because the weather is better, because there's no stress and there's no push from Ynet, and like everything is just easier, right? And you have a bigger SUV and a nicer house, and it's a slippery slope that we were not willing to be part of this game, and we were looking for an excuse to come back to Israel. And I don't want to call you an excuse, but you were our life rope, I guess. Would that be the term? You were our landing pad. Like you
Saying
provided the opportunity.
saying any landing pad is good enough, even for a guy who's just an excuse. It's okay. All right, so you came back, and then you went through a year of EIR-ship at Aleph. What was that like for you? So here comes a guy, just to be very clear, okay? Harvard Medical School, Amazon Moonshot Factory, whatever they call it over there, right? Amazon, a big corporate life in San Diego with a big budget or whatever it was, and come back to Aleph and sit in a little office down the hall from us. What was that like that year?
So it was definitely an interesting experience, because one of the first thing I was told by your partner Adam was that EIR is the worst job in the world. I was like, okay, that's going to be fun.
He managed your
Uh,
expectations properly.
Absolutely, that
Yeah.
was the worst experience ever. No, but I think I was stepping into this really in two levels. One was an opportunity to really come back to Israel, and I think the ability to be an EIR was keeping me very broad. I kept seeing stuff all the time, which I really enjoy, especially as a curious person and as someone who has been always looking for interesting stuff to explore. I think I was exploring, if you want, a new game with new rules and a new territory that I wasn't familiar with. And, you and I have spent many hours together working, especially in the first 6 months, where I was basically joining you almost everywhere. And I've learned how you do what you do, which is not easy. Not to learn, not to copy. Um, I was really fortunate to be part of it, but it was also exhausting. I couldn't introduce myself anymore. Like I couldn't say who I was anymore. So many people, so many faces. That was an overwhelming experience. Very powerful, very overwhelming.
How many ideas did you have throughout the year that you thought you wanted to start a company on?
I think what I discovered being on, call it, the VC side, where you keep hearing interesting ideas coming from excellent people, is that as much as I was curious coming up with my own ideas and starting a company, that was not my objective. I wasn't the typical EIR coming to a fund to start a company. I could have done that probably better and with less efforts in the Bay Area or in Boston. I came to Aleph to open my mind, and I think what I've realized that what I really enjoyed doing was not listening to people pitching their ideas, but connecting ideas of different people.
Interesting.
So and that I think it was when I started a company was when I realized I don't have that power as a venture capitalist, right? So as a venture capitalist, you choose your cards. You invest in this or you invest in that. You don't have the privilege of dividing and conquering, and taking pieces of each. Um, or say, you and you guys, you should work together to build something bigger.
So after a year, you start OR, OHR. What is OR?
So like literally it's light.
Right, the word or means light, taken
Yes.
from the first chapter of Genesis. Right, in Hebrew, Vayomer Elohim Yihi Or, Vahi Or, and God said, let there be or light. And then there was light.
Yes. And I think that's exactly what it is. Like when I started OR, and I have a hard time saying I started, even though I'm a single founder, but I feel like we have founded it together. You even came up with the name. So I- we started OR, if I may,
Yeah.
when
The only difference is you could have started or without me, and I couldn't start or without you. You'd find another name, but there's like no chance that I could, one, get a PhD, but two, understand synthetic biology.
fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm sure you couldn't. Uh, so or is really, I think, a collection of everything I've hoped for. When I told you about the two-pager a few minutes ago of what would be my dream job, it was about really discovering critical technologies that could position Israel as a leader and find the talent and the capital to build them. And Or is an example of that, and I consider it the way to execute on these two-pager. Um, it's basically a way to synthesize chemicals in a new way using biology, but not just like chemicals, right? Chemicals sounds boring, even gray. Thinking of like chemicals that are of strategic interest. And I think beyond the technology, one thing I've learned over being, an EIR at Aleph for about a year is that technology is cool, but it's not enough. What you need is like a sophisticated go-to market, and how to build a venture business is very different than how to build a business. I sometimes struggle with this still because there's something very, um, I don't want to say silly, but something very weird about venture businesses. There's a lot of growth involved, and there's a lot of storytelling involved. I've learned how to do this, I think, pretty well. I mean, you've decided to invest. Um, and I think or is a way of making chemicals a venture business, if you want.
Okay, so there's been a lot of, you said, using synthetic biology to make chemicals. Could you be more specific? Because there's like been a lot of biomanufacturing businesses. So
Or actually focuses on strategic chemicals, as I said, and the first focus is rocket fuel. We've identified rocket fuel as a very interesting chemical because first, it's a very interesting market. It's a very rapidly growing market that has shifted from government owned rocket launches to space to private companies like SpaceX taking over the market and moving from launching rockets once a year to twice a week. So the demand for rocket fuel has gone very high, has gone up, and we've figured out a way to make rocket fuel cheaper and better than how you make it from crude oil. We realized that rocket fuel needs to be very clean to keep the rocket engine happy. So the real pain point of the rocket industry is the ability to reuse the engine. And when we use biology, something biology does very well, it's very selective and very specific. So we can actually fashion exactly the composition of the fuel. And because we start from simple elements and not crude, gooey, dark crude oil, we can start from a clean feedstock, use a very selective biological process, and end up with a very clean product. And rocket fuel is a very good example of how a clean product has a benefit.
we can call it kosher rocket fuel. It makes the engine happy.
You can call, yeah, but you can't fly on Saturdays. I think more than it's a kosher, it's a creationary chemical, right? So we don't
What does that mean,
distill it.
creationary?
We don't distill it from oil. We don't take something out there and extract it
And refine it.
and refine it, right?
Right, there are no refineries. Yeah.
Exactly. We create it from scratch. We actually build it from the very basic elements that build fuels or chemicals in general, which are the atoms. And we focus on carbon atoms, which are basically the backbone of organic material, including fuel.
And skeptical venture investor would say, okay, I've heard about biomanufacturing and self-manufacturing, a million things, for the last, I don't know how many years. Here's another one. How would you answer that?
That was Google in the 1999 period.
Well played. There have been 11 search engines. Here's another one. Oops, it's Google.
Yeah. No, I hear
I want to
them.
thank you for allowing me to invest in Google before it's Google. I didn't think of that, but
I think you're right. I mean, I've even heard worse things like PTSD. Like some investors tell me they're really tired of hearing that same pitch over again. It's true. I think what we have is we have a reverse engineered solution. And I want to be just, if I can take a few more seconds to explain what it means. I think in most cases, when you talk about biomanufacturing or, producing stuff sustainably, you think of, here's an interesting technology. I can make stuff from it. What can I make? Here, everything was reverse engineered to say, okay, rocket fuel is an actual product you can build a solution for. Can you use any technology out there? And biology has turned out to be the best technology to do that, not just a technology you can use or a technology you've been using and applying a product for. I think this is what's unique about Or. It's not just rocket fuel, by the way. We do make other things, and we have different areas of focus.
other critical chemicals.
Other critical chemicals. We actually see ourselves as a B2G company for the most part. We see ourselves as trying to create chemicals that would benefit governments and obviously on the good side of the planet. which is an interesting it's an interesting dilemma sometimes when you produce critical chemicals, because you understand where they can end up, where the technology can end up. It's true for any critical technology like AI, like other things that can have unintended consequences. But yeah, we want to be on the good side.
So, I think it's obvious that biology creates chemicals, right? Photosynthesis is a biological reaction. It creates
Everything has started from a biological process.
right. So why didn't anyone else do this before?
I think people for many years have, or still are, trying to engineer biology or make synthetic biology by taking modern biology and engineer it to be better
Mm-hmm.
or more specific or targeted towards one way or another. We've talked about synthetic biology and the ability to engineer it, and thinking about the building blocks that we have: cells, enzymes, genes, and engineer them. I think what OR does, and hence the name, it goes back in time to before biology existed. And I think what we cracked was the ability not to engineer biology or modern biology to be better, is to go back in time to before biology existed and play evolution again, but this time with a dollar sign on the forehead. So how can we direct evolution from the very early beginning of origin of life and use modern biology to use primordial chemistry to develop modern products. And that's, I think, has been the way for us to overcome the complexity and the cost associated with biomanufacturing, which is ultimately very high.
I find it interesting that you can say you play evolution, so to speak. It's on some level what you're doing is anti-Darwinism. It's more again godlike. You go back to the primordial soup, the primordial chemistry, and try to create a bang, so to speak, by creating light or energy, as the case may be. I've gone, by the way, to reinterpreting the first chapter of Genesis, the word or from light to energy,
Hmm.
because of you, by the way. And choshech, or which is commonly referred to as darkness, as the absence of energy. Um, but isn't this like anti-Darwinist?
It's an interesting framing. I think it's really the best of both worlds in a way. So we don't just say evolution happens and we are happy about it, because evolution is to some extent a stochastic process, right? You accumulate diversity,
Yeah.
and then based on the condition, diversity is being selected for a beneficial trait. What we can do is we can eliminate that. We can go back in time and ask, okay, no matter what happened throughout evolution, what are the important junctions that evolution has created for us? Can we walk a different route? So we're using evolution, but not in an evolutionary mindset,
Mm.
right? We're taking a very engineering-like approach in an evolutionary landscape. So we're not ignoring Darwin or doing like an anti-Darwin move. It's more of a reverse Darwinism in a way where we go back and revisit junctions, and we can allow ourselves the freedom of jumping between one place to another, which is something evolution typically doesn't do. It has a very um, small step, baby step way of moving across the landscape.
Can you give us an example of how you engineer the route of evolution?
Yeah, so I mean, at OR, we build carbon chains. Carbon chains are the building block of everything organic. And we don't do them the way nature does them, like iteratively, one carbon at a time with a lot of complexity. We actually choose what is the carbon chain we want, and we can go straight to that carbon chain and produce it in a way that would only lead to that particular molecule.
That's like backcasting. You decide, hey, this is where I got to get to, and then you reverse engineer it back to where it needs to go and build it forward.
Yes, and if you do it the right way, you don't have to distill it or to refine it, going back to the refining concept. And, we just get that particular molecule and nothing else.
So one of our recent guests on Invested was Sender Cohn, who's someone you've gotten to know also. My friend since high school was setting up, among other things, Nouveau Labs here in Israel, which is meant to be like a fund for like a Bell Labs style innovation center for where world-class scientists like Dan Davidi could come to Israel and be a part of. So, as you said, you went to Harvard Medical School. You did say Weizmann was better than Harvard Medical School, and then you went to the Amazon, whatever it's called, Moonshot Factory out there in California, and came back to Israel. If you were pitching a world-class scientist now at Harvard or MIT or the Amazon Moonshot Lab or the lab in, Jen Duna's lab in Berkeley or whatever it is, or at Stanford, what's the pitch why you should come do it in Israel? Like, why be like Dan?
Okay, so I think you're mixing two things, because there's the Bell Lab or the Nevo Lab, which I think is a very interesting idea. I actually have some counter arguments of why this is actually not the best place to allocate capital, and we can bring Center in maybe to the next episode. I think the challenge and the limitation here in Israel is not necessarily a place to do good research. Weizmann is better than Harvard, right? We said that from the beginning, and we should let U.S. taxpayer money train our people, right? People go to Harvard, they go to Stanford, they go to those best places, and they learn how to do things. This has been since the birth of Israel as a state. People have gone out, have learned, and have come back to build in Israel. I don't think building in Israel and keeping Israel as a closed system with everything in it will actually benefit a small country like us. I think it's good that people go out and come back. I think what's missing is not a place to do research, is the talent to take that research and IP to the next level and scale it. This
Explain
is
more.
uh, I think, again, the limitation is almost like the high-tech industry, where you've seen very early stage companies in the 80s and 90s starting in Israel and then immediately going to the valley, right? And people were flipping coins to see which founder would move to the valley. I think we're seeing that exactly thing now in deep tech and biotech and synthetic biology, and you name it, right? There isn't the talent and the capability to scale these companies here. And what is missing is not IP. What is missing is the know-how. You need to send people not to work in academia, but in BASF and in Lanzotech and in Pfizer and in Moderna and in the places where you scale biotech, and then come back to Israel and do that from here. And we're seeing this in the high-tech industry now, with companies headquartered in Israel and growing in Israel as Israeli companies.
So let's make sure I understand. So the problem here, or the challenge or the opportunity, either way you look at it, is somebody who graduates the Weizmann Institute or Tel Aviv University with a degree in the hard sciences, who then goes to Harvard, MIT, or someplace like that. Then if they want to keep doing research, they can do it there and then come back for an academic position here over time. That's kind of interesting. What's really interesting is if they want to go out and do a company, and then they should do a stint at some commercial entity in the U.S. and then come back here.
Yes.
And your view, therefore, is that Israel is a better place to commercialize, provided that there is a set of people here who know how to help commercialize these companies, much like happened beginning in the 2000s in the high-tech industry here. That's the basic case?
That's the case. I think you can on top of it add the ability. So I would argue that bringing an Israeli back to Israel is less important than bringing an experienced biotech leader to Israel, even if he's not Israeli. Even better. So I would argue that someone like that would probably be worth 10 Israelis coming back.
An entrepreneur.
An entrepreneur or a technical leader. Yeah.
What is a technical leader, as
So
opposed to one of these guys who goes to MIT after their PhD at Weizmann?
it's someone who has done technology in the real world, where the academic paper is not the outcome, but the product is. And I think we see it very often, where people come out of academia and there's a very significant disconnect between technology in an academic environment and technology in the real world.
So you don't think there's as much value in doing the research here? Like, for argument's sake, if you had, $1 billion, Dan Davidi had $1 billion, and I said to you,
Is this an offer?
no,
Oh,
because I don't have the money to give you. I give you a couple $1 million to start a company. That's it. That's it. In an office and good coffee. And good
mediocre,
coffee.
yeah.
But okay, now we're in a feud. The coffee here is first class.
It's first class on the partner's floor.
Tell everybody that's not true, that everyone gets the same
No,
coffee.
coffee at Aleph is top notch.
You know why?
Because you choose it.
And it's biologically engineered,
There you go.
There you go. Jesus.
You're regretting this, right?
Listen, you know too much sitting here all this time.
Oh,
It's
I
like,
see. Well, you chose to.
so if you had $1
invite me.
billion, back to that, which now your chances of getting it have gone down after if you're insulting our
There were
coffee.
0 to begin with, so it's fine. Yeah.
Or is going to be a big outcome.
Yep.
So, or is successful. You have $1 billion, and you say, okay, I can sponsor 100 Israelis at Harvard University to study, or I can set up a new wing of the Weizmann Institute or Tel Aviv University to house 100 scientists here. What are you doing?
Neither. Because the 100 Israelis will go to Harvard anyways, and they will come back to Israel anyways if they had the opportunity. I would take those $1 billion, I would take those 100 Israelis going out to Harvard, and I would find them positions in the best biotech companies in the world, and then pay for them to come back and build companies in Israel.
Got it. You're all focused on the commercialization. The
That's what we
research is
miss.
less important.
That's what we're missing here.
Does that come from a view, which I think is true factually, which is historically much innovation in science came out of academia, but more and more it's coming out of the commercial, right? If you look at what's going on in AI, it's almost 100% at this point coming out of places like Google and Meta, et cetera. And your view is the same thing is going to happen in deep tech and the hard sciences?
I think it's happening, and COVID has actually started this. I think I grew up in academia, very loyal community. You never go out. If you do, you never come back. And I'm fortunate to actually leave academia. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, living from Harvard to Amazon, even though everybody told me I should definitely take the job. I actually refused first, and I told Amazon no. It took a few weeks until they basically kept increasing the offer, which I couldn't resist anymore.
Not a bad negotiation for an academic.
Thank you. Anyways, I think, what was the question?
What was the question? The question was, you were talking about that people should go to work at these biotech companies, and then if they have $1 billion, come back here. And I said to you, is that because more and more IP is coming out of commercial companies rather than academia? And in AI came out of more commercial companies like Meta and Google and OpenAI. And is that the same thing going to happen in deep tech?
Yes. So yeah, I was telling you I was loyal to academia, and then I left academia, and I think academia need to look in the mirror and ask itself, where is it heading? I think in many ways, innovation used to be in academia, and everything else was like, low level research. When COVID hit, Moderna came out of Flagship, which was not an academic institution. And we've started seeing a lot of capital going into private sector, investing in biotech. And we've started seeing top researchers like Aviv Regev and other, probably the best researcher in the world. She's Israeli. She headed the Broad Institute, and now she works at Genentech. And we've started seeing a wave of the best researchers in the world leaving academia and moving to industry, because research is now happening in industry, not in academia. And it's not obviously black and white, and there's always like gray, but I think academia is downhill, and top research is now happening outside academia.
Do you think about whether, for example, what Elon Musk is working on and the U.S. government, which is going to take more budgets away from academia? It's not that Harvard's going to go out of business. They got a lot of money in the endowment. Is that going to impact research in academia and accelerate people going into industry, in your view?
Again,
By the way, Musk is another great example. I'm thinking about deep tech, right? Anduril and SpaceX and Tesla has advanced, battery technologies, space technologies, rocket technologies, military technologies, far more than academia has and government has over the last, 5 to 10 years.
So it's not entirely true, because there was a lot of government money involved,
Sure.
right? So it's, I think, somewhere in between. Okay, here's like very important research we need to do, and we have the breadth to do it, which is not very typical for the private sector, right? Venture money is not typically invested in science, but there was a lot of science involved in Tesla and SpaceX and all these things. And Elon had the breadth because of, to some extent, government money. I think we're starting to see what's called focus research organizations, where people invest money in outside of academia, nonprofit organizations. I think what Elon has done, he was able to build a business model around that and make it a for-profit business, which drives innovation forward. So yes, I think we would see more and more of those hybrid models of outside academia for/nonprofit. OpenAI is another example, right? Started as a nonprofit, ended up being basically a for-profit organization.
We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll see. But at the end of the day, it's outside academia, innovation happens, and we're seeing this in biotech as well.
So when you think about Israel, you don't want to make it the Boston of the Middle East, because academia exists in Boston. What you really want to make it is the commercial hub of science for the world. Is that your vision?
Yes. I want to make it the Silicon Valley of biotech.
Silicon Valley of biotech. Okay. But there is a Silicon Valley of biotech, like, Genentech.
Well, they exist here, but they don't have the fast turnaround and innovation that we have.
So outline for me, like, where is Israel's position in this world of future science? Be specific.
I think really it's in untrivial connectivity between fields.
Go ahead.
So you
Explain.
will
What does that
see
mean?
Genentech in the US easy, right? I mean, it's a business of innovation and scale and everything. But I think Israeli ingenuity is in the ability to connect non-trivial dots together and bring, very cliche, but multidisciplinary teams to work together and speak the same language, the language of get shit done. And this is something very Israeli that I've experienced. Moving from Israel to the US and now back, and also working with a US team. Our US employees are much, much better at working very systematically and getting from A to B. But what happens in Israel is ending up at C unexpectedly. And this is, I think, where Israeli innovation is very powerful.
So let's talk about future areas of science for a second. If I was finding the next Dan Davidi EIR, where should I be looking, and what area should I look at?
I thought you've realized that was a mistake.
That's why I got to get the next one.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to do better next time.
I don't have a good answer because I think I grew up in a very kind of a non-orthodox way, right? Shifting. I had a very weird trajectory, right? I started as an academic, but I also had some episodes where I went to be a teacher and then moved from like to become an entrepreneur, moved to Harvard. Like I did many transitions over the last year, and I don't think it's very over the last years, and I don't think it's very typical. I would probably um try to find someone who has done like a similar transition from top level academia to the industry.
Yeah, but I'm asking a more specific question. So I got a bug about synthetic biology. I found you. I need to get a bug about the next three areas. What are they? It's not synthetic biology. It's more synthetic biology. It's
It's a
okay.
waste of money. Um, it's I think energy.
Energy
Energy is going back to ore. I think this is the most important currency of our
generation.
generation.
Yeah.
And
And what's another area?
I'm a fan of the material world, right? I think technology is not important anymore in the digital space. I mean, not important is a bold statement, right? But I think AI will be an enabler, but where the monetization will really be is leveraging AI in the physical space.
And that's an interesting comment. So you think the digital space is going to be tough to monetize?
Yes, it's going to be a commodity.
Everything in the digital space is going to be a commodity?
Most of it's going to be very hard to find interesting asymmetric opportunities.
Because
Because competition will just be too fast. I mean, who are you competing against? More digital entities?
yeah.
Um,
I mean, I got 100 bots and 100 coders and junior coders, and eventually over time, everything gets reduced to zero, including the application layer, not just the foundation model layer.
yes, but a drug is still a drug, and
And
you
energy is still energy.
energy is still energy.
Although maybe that's what you're paying for in the digital world going forward, which is some sort of added value on top of the cost of energy.
So it's the hardware that can optimize that, and not the right.
Okay, so you're a fan of the physical world.
Yeah.
And energy is one area. Any specific areas of energy?
I don't know. I think that's really something that, as a scientist, I want to give you an educated answer. I think you've made a mistake once of focusing on synthetic biology. I wouldn't want you to do another mistake. I think there's definitely a lot of things happening in like fusion energy, but that sounds very remote. If you think about energy storage, that's a big one, right?
I feel like everyone's circling around that, though, and Elon Musk got to play there with his Tesla walls and his batteries, etc.
Correct, but it's one way to look at the problem. Another thing would probably be, the right word to say would be quantum. Everybody's into quantum, but again, it sounds to me like, and especially coming early stage as you typically do, there are binary answers there, right? It's not, this is a very good team. This looks like a very good entrepreneur. I'm going to invest in them because it's going to be okay, and they're going to figure it out with some money and good operation. I think it comes down to feasibility.
How is science made different by AI?
So there are trivial things like it accelerates the pace at which we model things, right? I mean, protein folding is a very good example where actually another innovation coming outside of academia where Google decided to get into the play and developed AlphaFold, and that has changed the industry. Um, the counter argument would be that as much as AlphaFold is great and helps everyone design new proteins as drug targets or as, the ability to whether cure disease or use it for other purposes, we have not seen the ability to just like engineer proteins out the gate, right? We still need the experimental phases. We still need clinical trials. We still need all the stuff that is involved in the messy biological part. So I think AI has advanced the time it takes for a cycle, and it allow us to narrow down the search space dramatically, but it doesn't solve the problem of the
In
slow and
vitro.
painful scientific hypothesis testing.
How much do you think it's sped up biology or synthetic biology? Is there a way to kind of capture that in a percentage?
It has shifted the balance and the capital allocation more than it has accelerated it, I think, because
Explain.
you could have brute force problems that you can now do more intelligently approach them, right? So that lowers the barrier to enter for smaller companies. But still, and I think this is actually a very good example, many of the companies, let's say, using AI to engineer better drugs are facing challenges when they need to scale, because clinical trials will still cost them hundreds of millions of dollars, whether or not they have AI. And the only players that can do that are the big pharma companies, which have originally brute forced the problem.
Is that a regulation problem or a scientific problem?
It's both, but I don't think it's regulation so much, because it's really a cultural problem. You don't want to try a drug that hasn't been tested and hasn't been proven safe.
How do you think about, I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know if I can answer for it. So a lot of what Pfizer did was based on Israeli data, and we're able to turn it quickly. You know, we both were at a presentation given by Professor Oded Rechavi of Tel Aviv University, and he was talking about why we use worms in analyzing neuroscience, because these worms regenerate themselves very quickly, so you get through a lot of life cycles very quickly, much faster than you can with a human being. It takes tens and tens of years, et cetera. And it got me thinking about all the things I want to speed up so that we can get answers to. And then it took me to think about, oh, wait a minute. The COVID vaccine was sped up by the access to the data on Israelis, particularly side effects, but also, at least in theory, I think the reduction of fatalities and heavily sick people here based on the data. And it occurs to me, based on what you're saying right now, that we actually aren't sure, or not necessarily can trust data as a way to speed up drug and vaccine delivery. You need to kind of go through the actual human life cycles.
I think there's no way to get robust enough data, and you always have to play a game of like risk management, right? And the more robust and rigorous you can be in acquiring data and do it multiple times in multiple scenarios, by eliminating confounding factors, you can make the right decisions. I think basing your decisions on one set of data that could have been corrupted, that could have been misunderstood, can be dangerous.
I mean, it was Gen Pop data here, right? It was population data. Israel has a very advanced medical system and a very advanced
No,
digital
I'm not
record-keeping
saying that the
system.
data is corrupted.
Yeah.
I'm saying that it's very specific, and you can see also
To
that
Israel, you're saying, or in general?
potentially, yes, it can be very specific, and it could have been acquired in a very particular way that might not be applicable to other.
You think it was in retrospect now, right? You weren't in the seat then, and those people who were in the seat then had to make hard decisions. Obviously, in retrospect, was it smart of Israel to use its data to get vaccines early, or is it better to actually wait on these things because you have more information?
Again, it's a hard decision that doesn't happen in vacuum, right? Everybody has seen what happened in Italy. Everybody has seen whatever in
Yep.
other
That's
places,
what
and
it
I
is. An
think
impossible decision. This is all retrospective.
it would be unfair of me to say that they've made the wrong decision. I probably would have made the same decision myself. Yeah.
Do you, uh, how, how does one, how should one think about using data to accelerate these actual life sciences, physical processes, or should we not? And we need to let biology take its course and actually not try to accelerate it.
So biology is going to take its course one way or another, right? It's going to just biology is everything. I think we have ways to collect data, and I think the biggest caveat is standardization. How do we collect data in a way that would be translatable from one place to another? the different models or different entities would be able to use it and come out with the same conclusions, or at least have the same input if being measured in one place versus another. Now it's definitely not the case. A lot of these models are garbage in, garbage out. I think people are tempted to think that it's not garbage out, and this is where the risk comes from.
And so AI is not going to help that because it's garbage in, garbage out. And so we shouldn't assume that in a lot of these hard decisions, AI is actually going to help us as it relates to physical sciences and biology.
I think AI can help us understand how to design an experiment, but it's not going to be able to generate the data without, I mean, maybe there's going to be a robotic system, right? But not maybe. There are going to be robotic systems to get data, but I think you still need the data. And in biological systems where chaos is genetically encoded, data can be hard to acquire.
How have you used AI at OR?
So we design proteins, we design enzymes to catalyze specific reactions, and we've used AI to engineer these enzymes and to predict how they would behave. Definitely helped us in engineering enzymes, and it has shortened the time from ideation to experiment. But we still need to do the experiments. We still need to get the chemicals.
While you were in EIR at Aleph, you experiment with a bunch of things, including trying to cure cancer with fava beans. Why did some of these things fail?
It's always, and you and I have been talking about this a lot. It's not just the technology. It's like finding the right people, the right partners, and being at the right time. And I think for some of them, I wasn't mature enough in my thinking, in my readiness to jump ship. I mean, being an entrepreneur is hard. It's a roller coaster, and I wasn't ready to do this, and I couldn't find the right partners to do this. To some extent, this is why I'm the only founder at OR. I was having a hard time finding a partner, and I think it's your fault. And I'm not just saying this to upset you. I think the reason we've been so
You
close.
can't upset me, but go ahead.
I can try.
Okay.
I know too much right now. So the reason I was having a hard time finding a partner is because I was surrounded by all this good, right? Coffee. Yes. I talk to you a lot. I'm surrounded by all partners, and I get the support from Aleph's platform. And it was just hard for me to justify having a partner.
So was it valued to be an EIR at Aleph? Like you'd recommend it to someone else?
I wouldn't, because I want to keep my office. I think being an EIR is a very confusing role. I think a typical EIR wants to start the company, and the only thing they need to be is focused. I think being an EIR is a very destructive role, because you see everything all the time. And this is why Eden told me this was the worst job in the world, because you're supposed to focus on your company, but you keep being pulled out to do other stuff.
So he was right.
He was right, but somehow here's another example of where logics doesn't work. He was right, but I feel like it was a very successful journey. I think Ron Goa would agree, and Lan Shia would agree.
Yeah. So the producers want me to ask you how I've harmed you during this process, or maybe outside of this process.
I think we don't have enough time for that. How have you harmed me? I think that I'm sometimes very cynical about the venture world. I think investors, you included, cannot really understand and shouldn't really focus and spend their time understanding what we're doing. I'm trying to stay grounded, working with you. You're up in the sky, and you're a visionary person.
That's a nice way of saying I have no understanding of what it is that you're actually working on. I didn't do well in high school chemistry either.
Well, you know chemistry today, right? The other day you told me, oh, I read a piece about whatever, right? Kerosene. It's like,
No. I actually talked to ChatGPT about it, so it
Okay.
explained it to me like I was a 16-year-old again.
okay,
So
good.
please explain it to me like I'm a 16-year-old, and I ask questions while driving.
So you've been using AI.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm
You see
trying
how
to
it
catch up on my high
accelerates
school
learning.
education.
Yeah,
High school education that I
exactly.
missed. So I can talk to you.
I don't think you've harmed me. I think it was really a fascinating journey.
So, assuming I was a high school student again, and the truth is I took AP biology in high school, so I would never have to see science again. That was my goal. My wife and kids know that. And I did well in AP biology, for what it's worth. Not so well in chemistry. But if you were making a pitch to high school Michael, or to any high school kid out there, as to why they should go study science instead of computer science. What's the pitch?
The pitch is that science is really the ability to look into something, hypothesize, and go test it. And it's driven by curiosity, whereas computer science is driven by execution. And that can be replaced tomorrow or even yesterday by AI. I would actually recommend going to study history or philosophy or science.
I'm also a fan of studying philosophy. Why philosophy?
So it makes you think. It makes you be critical. It makes you look at the world and ask questions and spend time thinking about things that are not trivial to answer, even with AI.
I think that's another reason also to study Talmud, for what it's worth.
You keep bringing this back, huh? I'm not going to study Talmud, Michael.
Yeah, listen, critical thinking.
A kosher restaurant was enough for me. Huh?
So, what are you having your kids study?
They go to a Waldorf school, so, you know.
There's like
Yeah, they're
enjoying
in nature
life
all
in
day.
nature.
Yes, no, but seriously, I think the same methodology would hold. I would want them to be critical thinkers. I would want them to not necessarily be an engineer or a computer scientist. I would want them to be critical thinkers.
Should we be investing in science and not technology more?
I think we should find mechanisms which are not venture capital to bridge the gap between science and technology.
Interesting.
Yes. And I think academia is not the right place to do that.
And you think venture capital is not the right place for it either?
It doesn't have the patience.
Interesting. Even though you see things like SpaceX and
You would not have invested in SpaceX, I think. I mean, be fair.
I'd invest in anything that Elon Musk does. We'll just say that. But
Okay, no, but
I
seriously.
have invested in something Elon Musk has done, but
No, I mean, be frank, right? I mean, if somebody pitched you an idea that was very science, like the early stages of SpaceX,
I
would
mean, like
you
Ore?
like Ore? Yeah.
I did it
Why?
because of the founder.
Okay, because you invest in people
Right.
and you trusted me for no good reason.
Don't make
Okay.
me regret
Do you
it, okay?
No, do you still trust this?
I do.
Why?
I don't know.
Okay.
Kosher dinner?
Kosher dinner.
You came to kosher dinner, I guess.
No, but we also did something else, right? We kept bringing on
Yeah.
experts that could validate my crazy ideas and could.
And many of them didn't, by the way, we should say.
Many of them didn't, and this is where it became interesting.
Yeah, exactly. What's a kavra?
You go way back. Kavra is actually an ornamental fish business, an ornamental fish farm that I started back when I was between my master's degree and my PhD. That used ornamental fish farming as a way to teach high school kids genetics. I did that in a boarding school of Naamat in Kanot.
Where's Kanot?
Kanot is near Ashdod.
Yeah, I know where it is, but
Okay, Kanot is near Ashdod, and this is a Naamat boarding school for kids.
that now has an ornamental fish farm because you created it to teach genetics.
Yes.
Well, okay, what's the coolest genetic thing that happened in the ornamental fish farm?
So just like ornamental fish are beautiful to see, and the genetics again is very quick. So within a few generations, you can create a guppy with like purple tail, right? And you can see this very quickly, and kids love it, and they can track the properties. So it almost like being able to witness evolution in a high school.
How fast from 2 guppies can you get to a guppy with a purple tail?
Literally a couple months.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's because my kids killed a guppy so quickly?
The generation time is very fast, and the number of offsprings or babies per fish is very, very high.
And is the purple tail a mutation? Or
Yes.
is it inbreeding? Or is it some
No,
sort of
it's eventually a mutation, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
everything
But
is.
one that happens that's reasonably predictable.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, and out of my general questions, so what can I find out about you on Google?
That I was the champion of Israel in equestrian show jumping.
Is that true?
That's true.
I had no idea.
Really?
Yeah, all this time over dinner and you never mentioned that one.
We had too much to cover.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, what strongly held opinion of yours has changed in the last year?
In the last year is that we have no other choice but to build here. Yes.
Thanks, Dan. This was fun.
Same here.
If you enjoyed listening to Dan and May or the other podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is the Aleph and Invested YouTube channel. And if you have suggestions for guests, please keep them coming. If you'd like to learn more about Dan Davidi, please follow him on LinkedIn. That's DANDAVIDI, and the company is OHR. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Michael.